I'm a licensed professional counselor, and this is my mental health analysis of the Richard Cottingham, aka the Torture Killer case. These are my speculations.
The Clinical File with John Cordray.
What internal pressures could lead someone to develop such an intense need for dominance and control over others, beginning so early in life? Richard Cottingham developed a fascination with bondage after encountering pornography as a very young child. He later explained that the images aroused and fascinated him from an early age. This early fixation on restraint and power over others stands out as one of the most significant mental health red flags in his background. Unmonitored exposure to explicit material during childhood can shape emerging views of intimacy and authority in lasting ways. When that exposure combines with limited social connections, it often strengthens private fantasies of control rather than encouraging healthy mutual relationships. Cottingham was born on November 25, 1946, in the Bronx, New York. His family relocated to Dumont, New Jersey in 1948 and then settled in River Valley in 1956. He grew up as the oldest of 4 children in a household where his father worked for an insurance company and his mother remained at home to care for the family. He attended Passaic Valley High School in Hillsdale, New Jersey, and graduated in 1964. During high school, he participated in track and cross-country events. Classmates described him as a quiet and solitary, but someone who kept few close friends and preferred spending time alone raising homing pigeons. This consistent pattern of social isolation, it raises important questions about his early emotional and social development. Difficulties in forming meaningful relationships can sometimes signal challenges with empathy or emotional reciprocity that later contribute to a profound detachment from the suffering of others. In October 1966, Cottingham began working as a computer operator for Blue Cross Blue Shield, a position he maintained until the day of his arrest. He married Janet on May 3, 1970 in Queens Village, New York, and together they raised 3 children, 2 boys and 1 girl. From the outside, his daily routine appeared completely ordinary and stable. He commuted into Manhattan for work each day and fulfilled his responsibilities as a husband and father without drawing attention. This conventional exterior concealed a completely separate pattern of extreme violence that had begun years earlier. The most recent development in this case occurred in early 2026. Cottingham, now 79 years old and facing serious health challenges, including diabetes, heart conditions, and kidney problems, confessed to the murder of 18-year-old Alice Eberhardt that took place on September 24, 1965. New Jersey police announced the official closure of that cold case on January 6, 2026, after he provided a detailed verbal and written confession on December 26, 2025. He described following Eberhardt from the hospital parking lot back to her family home using a fake police badge to gain entry and then strangling her inside the residence. Authorities did not file new charges because he is already serving multiple life sentences without parole. Detectives made several prison visits to obtain his admission, particularly after Cottingham experienced a near-death medical event in October 2025. Confessions that arrive so late in life can arise from shifting personal priorities as health declines and mortality becomes more immediate. In some cases, they reflect a desire to resolve lingering loose ends or to retain measure of narrative control, even when expressions of genuine remorse remain scarce or even absent. His documented history of violence began at a remarkably young age. His confession included when he was 18 years old that he murdered Alice, during which he strangled her inside her own family home. The fact that someone so young could act on lethal impulses suggests powerful urges that had already progressed far beyond mere fantasy. What allows such an escalation to occur in adolescence? Well, it usually indicates the presence of very weak internal inhibitors where the desire for dominance completely overrides any developing capacity for moral restraint or empathy. In 1967, he confessed to the murder of 17-year-old Mary Ann, whose body was recovered from the river in Hawthorne, New Jersey on April 20th after she vanished following her shift at a local store. He also admitted responsibility for the death of 29-year-old Nancy, who was found naked and bound inside her car in Ridgefield Park on October 30th after she had spent the evening playing bingo. These early cases demonstrate a clear shift towards selecting women he encountered in ordinary, everyday settings, choosing victims who were accessible yet entirely disconnected from his personal or professional life likely helped him maintain a strict separation between his predatory behavior and his public identity. A recurring psychological theme in his offenses involves the punishment of women he perceived as morally flawed. He explicitly told one survivor that she deserved the harm inflicted on her because of her line of work. This punitive mindset may have originated from a rigid internalized beliefs about gender roles or sexuality that were possibly reinforced by his own early arousal patterns. In 1968, he confessed to the murder of 13-year-old Jacqueline. She was beaten and strangled with her own flag sling strap in Midland Park on July 18th after she resisted his attempts to persuade her, and then he dragged her into a nearby bushes. The surge of violence triggered by resistance highlights how loss of control can provoke intense rage. From a psychological perspective, this reaction often connects to a fragile self-esteem that depends heavily on submission from others in order to feel secure. The following year, he admitted to the murders of an 18-year-old Irene, who was strangled with her own crucifix chain in Saddle River, and a 15-year-old Denise, who was killed in Saddlebrook on July 14th in 1969. The decision to use a victim's personal or religious item as an instrument of death introduces a layer of personification to violence. This choice might represent an unconscious effort to corrupt symbols of innocence or faith, possibly as a way to resolve deep internal conflicts around morality through acts of destruction. By 1970, he confessed to the strangling a 26-year-old Lorraine in New York, with her body discovered in a wooded area on March 1st. His offenses increasingly crossed state lines during this period. Greater mobility can indicate growing confidence in his ability to evade detection, or a deliberate search for new locations where he could satisfy intensifying compulsions without immediate risk. Throughout these years, he successfully maintained his employment and his marriage. He continued to father children and presented himself as a reliable and unremarkable member of his community. The capacity to compartmentalize harmful actions so completely, it represents prominent mental health indicators in cases like this one. Many offenders rely on disassociation to keep their violent conduct entirely separate from their everyday responsibilities, which allows the destructive behavior to continue without causing an immediate breakdown of their public persona. In 1972, he confessed to strangling 21-year-old Mary and discarding her body from a bridge in Rockville Center, where it was found on May 10th. A short time later, he admitted to a similar murder of a 23-year-old Laverne, whose body was recovered from the same creek on July 20th. The repeated use of familiar disposal locations suggests the presence of ritualistic elements, or even a sense of comfort derived from returning to known sites. Psychologically, this behavior can reflect unconscious need to revisit and reinforce the feelings of power obtained from earlier offenses. In 1973, he confessed to the murder of a 33-year-old Sheila, who was bludgeoned and stabbed inside her own home on July 20th, as well as the strangling of 18-year-old Maria near a bus stop on December 27th. The transition to invading victims' homes represents a substantial increase in personal risk. Such escalations frequently occur when previous methods begin to lose their intensity, prompting the offender to seek greater stimulation through heightened danger. In 1974, he admitted to a double murder of 17-year-old Mary Ann and 16-year-old Lorraine. Their bodies were discovered in a wooded area on August 14th. Committing lethal violence against two victims at the same time amplifies the experience of total dominance, This pattern may fulfill a deeply held fantasies in which one individual exerts absolute authority over multiple lives simultaneously. In 1978, he carried out non-fatal assaults on survivors, including pregnant waitress Karen, whom he drugged and assaulted before leaving her exposed, and 19-year-old Susan, whom he beat severely. The fact that some victims survive introduces an element of variability. These instances may reflect momentary limits on his impulses or deliberate decisions to avoid drawing excessive law enforcement attention at that time. In 1979, his brutality reached an extreme level. On December 2nd, the tortured remains of two women were discovered inside a New York City hotel room after days of captivity. One victim, 22-year-old Deidre, along with an unidentified companion, had been beheaded and their hands severed and their bodies set on fire. Mutilation carried to this degree often serves the purpose of completely erasing the victim's identity. Psychologically, such acts can symbolize the offender's fantasy of total possession, in which he claims parts of the body as trophies or denies the victim any remaining trace of humanity. Cottingham deliberately removed identifying features in an attempt to prevent identification. His decision to set the room ablaze rested on the assumption that fire would destroy all evidence, although the plan instead attracted immediate attention from authorities. In 1980, 19-year-old Valerie was found beneath her motel bed on May 5th after enduring extensive torture that included bite marks, incisions, and strangulation. He continued to assault other women in the days that followed until he targeted 18-year-old Leslie on May 22nd. Leslie's screams alerted motel staff and led directly to Cottingham's arrest. When police searched him, they recovered his prepared kit that included handcuffs, a gag, knives, and pills. The organized nature of his preparation demonstrates considerable forethought and planning. This trait often aligns with the methodical approach he applied to his legitimate employment as a computer operator. His above-average intelligence contributed significantly to his ability to evade capture for many years. The same precision he used in his professional work mirrored the calculated manner in which he planned and executed his crimes. This combination of cognitive sharpness and emotional detachment creates an exceptionally dangerous profile. Offenders with these characteristics can accurately assess risk while remaining largely unaffected by the human consequences of their actions. High-intensity contact formed the core of his offending pattern. He deliberately sought prolonged and direct engagement through binding, extended torture, and personal violation of his victims. This preference for close, sustained interaction likely fulfilled a foundational need for raw dominance. The immediate reactions of fear and pain from its victims provided powerful reinforcement of his sense of power in moments when ordinary life offered him little sense of control. Instigation in his crimes involved the intentional provocation of terror and prolonged suffering. This behavior may have served as a compensation for perceived personal inadequacies or feelings of powerlessness in other areas of his existence. His documented social isolation during childhood and negative attitudes toward women, noted by some acquaintances, may connect to underlying sensitivities around rejection or abandonment. Frequent family moves in his early years could have disrupted the formation of secure attachment, leading him to seek absolute control over others as a way to prevent loss. Although no documented history of child abuse appears in available records, his solitary habits and intense focus on raising homing pigeons suggest a pattern of emotional withdrawal. When combined with an unaddressed paraphilic interest in bondage, these factors likely allowed harmful fantasies to develop and strengthen without external challenge or intervention. Cottingham primarily targeted young women, many of whom who engaged in sex work. He consistently objectified his victims and retained pieces of their jewelry as personal trophies. These trophies functioned as tangible reminders of his control. Possessing them allowed him to privately relive the experience and sustain the psychological rewards long after each offense concluded. The emphasis on punishment emerges clearly in statements made to survivors. He viewed certain women as deserving of the harm based on their choices or circumstances. This putative outlook may have represented a projection of his own unresolved internal conflicts about sexuality and morality onto his victims. The progressive escalation of his methods demonstrates a development of tolerance. What once provided sufficient stimulation eventually required more extreme acts to produce the same level of thrill. His repeated use of certain motels and disposal locations, choices he apparently believed would shield him, ultimately assisted investigators in connecting the cases. The maintenance of his double life required exceptional compartmentalization skills. He managed to function effectively as a husband, a father, and an employee while simultaneously committing atrocities. This profound separation suggests dissociative processes or antisocial personality features in which empathy remains sharply limited or compartmentalized. Interviews conducted with Cottingham reveal a flat emotional affect and a complete absence of remorse, which are characteristics that align closely with well-documented traits of psychopathy. His confessions first began in 2009 after decades of consistent denial and have continued in piecemeal fashion ever since. He has claimed responsibility for a large number of victims, though only some of those claims have been verified through evidence. The gradual nature of these revelations may serve to manipulate authorities or satisfy a continuing need for attention even while incarcerated. His declining health and near-death experience in October 2025 appeared to have prompted the most recent confession to Lissa's murder. These late admissions continue to surprise even seasoned investigators. They demonstrate how effectively some individuals can conceal their actions for extraordinary long periods. And the psychological impact on the victims and their families have been profound and enduring over all these years. Survivors have carried lasting trauma, including symptoms consistent with post-traumatic stress disorder and significant difficulties trusting others. So what do you think about this case and about Cottingham? On the outside, he appeared normal. He had a family. He had children. He held down a job for many years. On the outside, it looked like it's just like your neighbors, unassuming. But behind those closed doors, the secret life he carried for many, many years, he was a monster. So what did you think about this case? Were there any elements that stood out to you? Thank you for joining me today. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe.